The neon sign of the diner flickered, casting a lonely glow on Evelyn Hayes as she wiped down the last counter. She was a ghost in this city, saving every dollar to study art in Florence, a dream that felt 1,000,000 miles away. But tonight, a new customer sat in the back booth, a man whose suit was worth more than her entire life, Alessio Carbone, the city's most feared mafia boss. He was there for one reason, his elderly mother. And when his mother began to cry, ignored and confused, Evelyn did the one thing she was never supposed to do. She knelt, ignored the bodyguards, and spoke in the one language that connected them all. Perfect, fluent Italian. Alessio's eyes narrowed from the shadows. He heard every word. And in that moment, the waitress didn't just get a tip, she sealed her fate. The Verona diner wasn't a restaurant, it was a time capsule. The vinyl on the booths was cracked like old leather, the air hummed with the buzz of a dying neon sign, and the coffee tasted like scorched regret. It was here, in the overlooked corner of Little Italy, that Evelyn Hayes clocked in for her second double shift of the week. Evelyn was invisible, and she preferred it that way. At 24, her life was a repeating loop of lukewarm coffee, aching feet, and the sharp, nasal voice of her manager, Mr. Henderson. "Hayes, table 4 is sticky. Mop in the back, and try to smile. You look like you're at a funeral." She wasn't at a funeral, but she was mourning her life. Every $5 tip, every grimy quarter, was tucked into a shoebox under her bed, labeled Firenze. Florence, the city of art, of history, of second chances. Her tiny walk-up apartment was a shrine to it, with dog-eared library books on Brunelleschi and Vasari piled high. She practiced her Italian listening to grainy opera recordings, whispering the words to herself as she scrubbed dried ketchup off laminate tables. Her nonna had taught her, a lifeline to a heritage Evelyn had never seen. The Verona had its regulars, the construction crew at 6 a.m., the college students at midnight. And then there was her. Every Tuesday and Thursday, at precisely 3 p.m., an old woman would arrive. She was small, draped in black lace despite the season, her silver hair pulled into a tight, severe bun. She always took the booth by the window, and she was always alone. The other waitresses, Brenda and Janine, rolled their eyes when she walked in. "It's the nonna. Good luck," Janine would mutter, disappearing into the kitchen. The old woman, Isabella, spoke in thick, broken English, her words steeped in a Sicilian accent, so heavy it was almost a different language. She would point, her gnarled finger trembling, at items on the menu she clearly didn't want. She'd ask for a caffè corretto, and when she was brought a regular coffee, she would just sigh, her eyes welling with a profound, impenetrable sadness. Evelyn was the only one who didn't avoid her. She would bring Isabella her coffee, extra hot, with a small pitcher of steamed milk. She'd smile, use simple, slow English, and nod patiently as the woman rambled in a mix of Italian and English about her garden, her late husband, and the son who was too busy. But Evelyn knew Isabella was more than just a lonely old woman, because whenever Isabella was there, so were they. 2 men, invariably dressed in immaculate, dark suits, would take the booth by the door. They were built like refrigerators, with impassive faces and eyes that missed nothing. They never ordered food, just 2 black coffees, which they never drank. They watched Isabella. They watched the door. They watched everyone. Evelyn knew who they were. This was Little Italy, after all. You didn't have to see a gun to know it was there. These were Carbone men. And that meant the old woman was someone sacred. One rainy Thursday, the diner was unusually quiet. Mr. Henderson was in the back, yelling at a supplier on the phone. Isabella was in her usual booth, stirring her unwanted coffee. Evelyn was refilling sugar caddies when the bell above the door chimed. The rain seemed to stop. The hum of the neon sign felt louder. He didn't walk in so much as he consumed the space. He was tall, and the cheap diner lighting seemed to cling to his bespoke charcoal grey suit. His hair was black, swept back from a face that looked carved from marble, harsh, beautiful, and utterly cold. His eyes, the colour of burnt espresso, scanned the room once, dismissed it, and landed on his mother. This was Alessio Carbone, the shadow, the capo of the Carbone family. Evelyn had seen his picture in the one newspaper the diner subscribed to, usually next to words like indictment, acquittal, or unsolved. He ran the city's unions, its shipping lanes, and its shadows. He didn't look at Evelyn, or at anyone. He slid into the booth opposite his mother. Evelyn could feel the tension radiating from him. He was a creature of silk and steel, forced into a cage of formica and grease. "Mama," he said. His voice was a low gravel, impatient. "You cannot keep coming here. It is not safe. It is not clean." Isabella flinched. "It was your father's. He liked—" "My father is dead," Alessio cut her off, his voice soft but brutal. "And he is dead because he was careless. Basta." Evelyn kept her head down, her hands shaking slightly as she wiped a counter that was already clean. She heard him slide a velvet pouch across the table. "I brought you the stones you asked for. From Palermo." Isabella didn't even look at it. She just stared out the window at the rain. "I want to go home, Alessio. To Sicily." "This is your home," he stated. He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. He hadn't been there for more than 30 seconds. He dropped a $50 bill on the table, enough to buy the entire coffee machine. "Marco will take you when you are ready." One of the men by the door, Marco, apparently, nodded. Alessio Carbone turned and walked out. The bell chimed, and the diner seemed to exhale. Isabella watched him go, and for the first time, Evelyn saw a tear trace a path down her wrinkled cheek. The old woman looked at the $50 bill on the table, then at her coffee, and she covered her face with her hands, her small shoulders shaking. Evelyn's heart broke. Forgetting her fear, forgetting the bodyguards, she grabbed a fresh napkin and a glass of water and walked over. She set them down gently. "Signora," Evelyn whispered. Isabella looked up, her eyes red. She waved a dismissive hand. It's fine, just old." Evelyn hesitated. It was against the rules. It was dangerous, but the woman looked so shattered. She leaned in closer, her voice barely a breath, and said the words she only ever spoke to her opera tapes. "Don't cry, Mum. The sun will return." Isabella's head snapped up. Her eyes, clouded with grief, suddenly sharpened. She stared at Evelyn as if she'd grown a second head. The two bodyguards by the door stiffened. Marco's hand twitched toward the inside of his jacket. Evelyn froze, realizing her mistake. I'm sorry. I just mean—" Isabella gripped Evelyn's wrist. Her hand was surprisingly strong, her rings cold against Evelyn's skin. You speak?" Evelyn, trapped, could only nod. A little. Just a little. A slow, dazzling smile spread across Isabella's face, a smile of such brilliance it erased 20 years of sadness. It was the first time Evelyn had ever seen her truly smile. "Oh, my child," Isabella breathed, clutching her hand tighter. Finally, someone who understands. From that day on, Evelyn was no longer invisible. She had been seen, and in the world of Alessio Carbone, being seen was the most dangerous thing of all. The next Tuesday, the diner was chaos. A bus carrying a high school sports team had broken down nearby, and the Verona was suddenly flooded with 30 teenagers demanding burgers and milkshakes. Mr. Henderson was sweating, his face puce as he screamed at the kitchen. Brenda was on the verge of tears. Evelyn was balancing 4 plates on her arm when the bell chimed. Isabella Carbone walked in, followed by Marco. The teenagers paid them no mind. "Hayes, table 6!" Henderson barked, not even looking. Isabella looked flustered by the noise. She navigated the chaos and sat in her usual booth. But she looked anxious, her hands twisting in her lap. Brenda, rushing past, dumped a menu on the table. "Be with you in a sec, hun." Isabella tried to flag her down. "Excuse, I need aqua." Yeah, water, I got it," Brenda snapped, not even looking back. Evelyn watched as Isabella tried again, this time with Janine, who was grabbing ketchup bottles. "Please, is caldo hot?" Janine just threw her hands up. "I don't know what you want, lady. I'll get Evelyn." Evelyn saw Isabella's face crumple. It was the same public humiliation, the same frustration of being unheard. But this time, someone else was watching. In the back booth, almost hidden in the dim light, sat Alessio Carbone. He hadn't entered with his mother. He'd been there already, a dark statue of silent fury. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white as he gripped a clean linen napkin. He was watching his mother be ignored, be treated like a nuisance, and his eyes were murderous. He was halfway out of his seat, a low growl forming in his chest, when Evelyn intervened. She dropped the plates at table 6, ignoring Henderson's shout. She marched to the bar, poured a tall glass of ice water with a slice of lemon, and brought it to Isabella's table. She set it down, placing a gentle hand on the older woman's shoulder. "Here you are, Ma'am." "Fresh water," Evelyn said, her voice clear and calm, cutting through the diner's noise. "Are you all right? You seem upset." The effect was instantaneous. Isabella's entire body relaxed, the anxiety melting from her face. She grasped Evelyn's hand. "Oh, Evelyn, thank you. It's this noise. And today is a difficult day." In the back booth, Alessio froze. Evelyn crouched, tuning out the noise. "Why, dear? What's wrong?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "It's the anniversary," she whispered, her voice thick with an ancient pain. "The anniversary of my husband's death, Alessio's father." Evelyn's breath caught. She looked at the old woman, seeing her not as a mafioso's mother, but as a widow. "I am so sorry, Isabella," Evelyn said softly, instinctively using her first name. She brushed a stray tear from Isabella's cheek with her thumb. "You shouldn't be alone today." "My son. He doesn't understand," Isabella said, her gaze drifting toward the back booth, though Evelyn was sure she didn't know Alessio was there. "He only feels anger. I only miss him. I just wanted a coffee like he liked, an Amaro. But they don't understand here." Evelyn nodded, her heart aching. "I understand. They don't have Amaro here. But," she paused, "my nonna, she used to drink espresso with a little anisette for the kick. It's not the same, but it's warm. Would you like to try it?" "Yes," Isabella whispered, her smile watery but genuine. "Yes, please, child." Evelyn stood up and turned, and slammed straight into her chest as hard as a brick wall. She stumbled back, a small "oh" escaping her lips. Alessio Carbone stood right behind her. He hadn't made a sound. His dark eyes were fixed on her, not with the cold indifference of before, but with a raw, burning intensity that made her skin prickle. The entire diner had faded. The teenagers, the waitresses, even his bodyguards, they were gone. There was only him. He was so close, she could smell the faint, expensive scent of cypress and bergamot on his suit. "Who taught you?" he asked. His voice was a rasp, so low she almost didn't hear it. Evelyn's throat was dry. My grandmother, sir." She was from Lucca. "You are not Italian," he stated. "No, sir. My grandmother married an American." He looked past her, at his mother. Isabella was watching them, not with fear, but with a small, hopeful smile. She looked peaceful, relaxed. It was a look Alessio hadn't seen on her face in a decade. He turned his gaze back to Evelyn. It was like being examined under a microscope. "She has not spoken of my father in 5 years," he said, his voice quiet, almost rough with emotion. "Not to me. Not to anyone. She's grieving, sir. She just wanted someone to understand." Alessio stared at her, a strange, unreadable emotion swirling in his dark eyes. He saw her, really saw her, the cheap, coffee-stained uniform, the exhaustion under her eyes, and the genuine, fearless compassion she had just shown the one person in the world he couldn't protect. He reached out, not to touch her, but to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so intimate, so unexpected, it made Evelyn's heart stop. His fingers were calloused, warm, and they barely brushed her skin, but it felt like a brand. "You," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper that sent a shiver straight down her spine. "A waitress who speaks the language of my mother and knows the art of my home." He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. The diner, his men, his entire world vanished. "You just stole my heart." Evelyn's knees went weak. She didn't know if it was a promise or a threat. With Alessio Carbone, she suspected it was both. He stepped back, his face returning to its impassive marble mask. He pulled a thick clip of money from his jacket, peeled off 3 $100 bills, and placed them on the counter. "For the coffee," he said, "and for my mother." He nodded to Marco, and without a backward glance at his mother, he was gone. Evelyn stood, her fingers pressed to her ear, her heart hammering against her ribs. Mr. Henderson was yelling her name, but she couldn't hear him. She was drowning in the scent of cypress, and the echo of 3 words that had just turned her entire life upside down. The next week, Evelyn's life changed. It started subtly. When Isabella Carbone came into the Verona, Evelyn was instructed by Mr. Henderson, with a strange, forced politeness, to take care of the signora, and that no other tables mattered. The 2 bodyguards, Marco and a new one named Santino, now nodded at Evelyn when she arrived. They even began drinking the coffee she brought them. But the real change was Alessio. He was there. Always. He'd be in the back booth when she started her shift, or he'd arrive just before his mother left. He never spoke to her. He just watched. He'd sit with a small, leather-bound notebook and a fountain pen, conducting silent business, but his eyes would lift and follow her as she moved through the diner. It was unnerving. It was terrifying. And, a small, secret part of her admitted, it was intoxicating. He was the most dangerous man in the city, and his entire, undivided attention was on her. The other waitresses noticed. Brenda and Janine gave her a wide berth, whispering behind the kitchen door. Mr. Henderson, meanwhile, had done a complete 180. He was obsequious, offering Evelyn the best shifts, complimenting her work. Evelyn knew it had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with the man in the back booth. One rainy evening, 2 weeks after the incident, Evelyn was wiping down the counter, her mind on a textbook about the Uffizi Gallery. The diner was empty, save for her and Henderson, who was cashing out the register. The bell chimed. Marco walked in, alone. His massive frame filled the doorway. "Mr. Henderson," Marco said, his voice polite but flat. "I need to speak to Miss Hayes. Alone." Henderson's face went pale. "Yes, of course. Take your time. I'll be in the back, cleaning or something." He practically ran into the kitchen. Evelyn's hands were suddenly damp. She dried them on her apron. Marco, is Signora Isabella okay? She is fine, Marco said. He stepped aside, holding the door open. A sleek, black Maserati, the kind that shouldn't even exist on this dingy street, was idling at the curb. Mr. Carbone requests your presence. He is hosting a dinner for his mother and would be honored if you would join them. Evelyn's stomach did a painful flip. Requests? Marco's face didn't change, but his eyes were firm. It is not a request, Miss Hayes. Evelyn looked back at the empty kitchen, then at the idling supercar. She had no choice. She untied her apron, hung it on the hook, and grabbed her thin jacket. She didn't even have her purse. This way, Marco said. He opened the back door of the Maserati. The inside smelled of rich leather and cypress. Evelyn slid in, her worn-out sneakers looking obscene on the plush carpeting. The windows were tinted so dark, the outside world vanished. The car pulled away from the curb with a silent, powerful purr. They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the grit of Little Italy for the opulent, gated mansions of the city's old money district. The car passed through a set of imposing, wrought-iron gates, the sea of the Carbone family crest woven into the metalwork. They drove up a long, cypress-lined driveway to a house that looked less like a home and more like a fortress from the Italian countryside, transported stone by stone. Marco opened her door. Mr. Carbone is in the main salon. Evelyn walked into a room that was larger than her entire apartment building. A fire roared in a fireplace she could have stood up in. The walls were covered in dark wood, and she noted with a pang of professional jealousy what looked like an original 17th-century Venetian landscape. Alessio Carbone was standing by the window, a glass of dark amber liquid in his hand. He was out of his suit, dressed in dark trousers and a black cashmere sweater that made him look softer, but somehow more dangerous. "Evelyn," he said. He didn't turn. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't aware I had a choice," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. He turned, and a slow smile touched his lips. "You always have a choice. It is the consequences that are non-negotiable." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Just then, Isabella swept into the room, beaming. She was dressed in a beautiful, deep blue velvet dress, pearls at her neck. She looked radiant. "Evelyn, dear, you've come." She rushed forward and pulled Evelyn into a fragrant hug, kissing her on both cheeks. "Alessio, isn't she beautiful? I told you, she must eat. She is too thin." Dinner was surreal. It was served in a formal dining room under a glittering chandelier by staff who were as silent as ghosts. The food was exquisite, risotto with white truffles, osso buco that melted in her mouth. Alessio and his mother spoke in Italian, and Evelyn found herself seamlessly joining in. She had never been so fluent, so relaxed. They didn't talk about business. They talked about art. Evelyn spoke of her dream of seeing the Pietà in Florence. Alessio, to her shock, spoke knowledgeably about the craftsmanship of Caravaggio, the light and shadow that defined his work. He understood the darkness, Alessio said, his eyes on her. He knew that beauty is nothing without the shadow. It gives it shape. After dinner, Isabella, claiming fatigue, kissed them both good night, leaving Evelyn alone with Alessio in the vast salon. The fire had died down to glowing embers. "She adores you," Alessio said, standing by the fireplace. "She's lonely," Evelyn replied, twisting her napkin. "She just wants someone to talk to." "She has me." "You speak to her," Evelyn said boldly, "but you don't listen, not in the language she needs." Alessio went very still. He studied her, his head tilted. "You are not afraid of me, are you?" "I'm terrified of you, Mr. Carbone. But I'm not wrong." He laughed. a real, deep laugh that startled her. "No, you are not." He walked over to her. He stopped just inches away, and the air crackled. "My mother. She is my only weakness, Evelyn. My rivals know this. The Falcone family. They would love to see her hurt." Evelyn's blood ran cold. The Falcones were the Carbone's bitter rivals, a family known for brutality, not precision. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," he said, "I have an offer for you, a business proposition." He stepped away, walking to a grand mahogany desk. He picked up a thick, embossed envelope. "You are wasted at that diner. My mother is isolated in this house. She needs a companion, someone to talk to, someone to take her to the museum, to the pasticceria, someone who speaks her language." He held the envelope out to her. "I want to hire you, Evelyn. Be her companion. Full-time." Evelyn stared at the envelope. I'm a waitress. I'm not a companion. I'm not." "You are the only person who has made her smile in a year," he interrupted. "You will live here, in the guest house. You will be safe. My men will protect you both." He pushed the envelope into her hand. "And of course, your education." Evelyn's fingers went numb. "What?" "I will pay for it. All of it. Your tuition to the Florence Academy of Art, your apartment in the Oltrarno, your books, your life. Consider it a signing bonus. You can leave in 1 year." This was it. Her dream. Everything she had ever wanted, handed to her on a silver platter, by the devil himself. She looked at the envelope, then at his handsome, unreadable face. This was a gilded cage. She would be his prisoner, a glorified babysitter for his mother. But Florence. "Why?" she whispered. "You could hire 100 Italian nurses." "Because they are employees," Alessio said, his voice dropping. You are the one who stole my heart, remember? I don't like my possessions to be so far away." He traced her jawline with one finger. "You are mine, Evelyn Hayes. You have been since you knelt at my mother's table." She looked at the ticket to her dream, trapped in his grasp. 1 year? She asked, her voice small. 1 year, he confirmed. "And I'm safe? No one," he said, his eyes turning to black ice, "will ever touch you again." She clutched the envelope. "Okay, I'll do it." "Good," he smiled, a predatory, satisfied smile. He leaned down and kissed her, not on the lips but on the forehead, a kiss of ownership. "Marco will take you to collect your things. You start tomorrow." The next 6 months were a dream painted on the bars of a cage. Evelyn's life at the Verona diner, the smell of grease and bleach, vanished as if it had never existed. Mr. Henderson, when she went to quit, simply nodded, his eyes wide with terror, and handed her a final paycheck he'd clearly had waiting. The guest house on the Carbone estate was larger than her entire apartment building. It was a beautiful, 2-story villa, with its own garden, filled with books on art and history that Alessio had curated for her. Her closet was filled with new clothes, elegant, simple dresses, cashmere sweaters, and leather boots. There was no price tag, just a note. A donna of the Carbone house must look the part. Her days were spent with Isabella. They were idyllic. They'd spend hours in the estate's massive garden, speaking Italian. Evelyn would read Dante aloud while Isabella knitted. Marco or Santino would drive them to the city's art museum, where Evelyn, now dressed in expensive wool, would explain the nuances of the high Renaissance to a beaming Isabella. Isabella, in turn, taught Evelyn to cook. True, Sicilian cooking. Pasta alla norma, arancini, cassata. In the estate's massive kitchen, surrounded by copper pots and fresh herbs, the old woman would share stories of her childhood in Palermo. stories of a life before she became Nonna Carbone. She never spoke of her late husband, and she never spoke of her first love. She only spoke of the sun, the sea, and the son she adored, but also feared. "He has his father's fire," Isabella told Evelyn one afternoon while shaping gnocchi, "but he has my heart. He just hides it, to protect it." Evelyn's evenings, however, belonged to Alessio. He would return late, the scent of the city and cold night air clinging to him. He would find her in the main library, and they would sit by the fire. He was a different man with her. He was no longer just the shadow. He was Alessio. He asked her about her studies. He'd bought her every book on her Florence wish list. He would listen, his focus absolute, as she explained the chemical composition of 14th century pigments. In return, he would tell her about his own passion, architecture. He spoke of restoring the old buildings in Little Italy, of preserving the history that the new glass and steel skyscrapers were trying to erase. "They build to be seen," he said one night, swirling a brandy. "But the real power is in the foundations, the parts no one sees, the parts that hold everything up." The romance between them was a slow, dangerous burn. It was in the way his eyes followed her when she crossed a room. It was in the way his hand would rest on the small of her back as they walked to dinner. It wasn't until a month into her stay that he truly kissed her. He'd found her sketching in the garden at dusk. He'd come up behind her, his large frame blocking the last of the light. He'd studied her drawing, a charcoal sketch of a cracked pomegranate. "You see the beauty in broken things," he'd whispered. "I see the life trying to get out," she'd replied, not turning. He'd taken the sketchbook from her, setting it aside. He'd taken her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I've been in the dark for a long time, Mayor Evelyn." And he'd kissed her. It wasn't the chaste, possessive kiss on the forehead. It was a kiss of raw, desperate hunger, a kiss that tasted of brandy and cypress, and a loneliness that matched her own. It was the kiss of a man who took what he wanted, and he wanted her. From then on, she wasn't just his mother's companion. She was his. But the gilded cage was still a cage. The tension in the house began to mount. The Falcone family, led by the notoriously volatile Riccardo Falcone, was making moves on Carbone territory. Alessio grew more stressed. His phone calls became shorter, his voice harder. He'd spend hours locked in his study with Marco and his consigliere. Evelyn could feel the change. The number of guards on the estate doubled. She was no longer allowed to go into the city, even with Marco. "For your safety," Alessio had said. One night, she woke to the sound of shouting. Not from outside, but from Alessio's study, just below her guest house. She crept to the window. Alessio and Marco were standing on the terrace in the moonlight. "It's a mistake, Capo," Marco was arguing, his voice a low, urgent rumble. "Taking her to the opera gala? It's a public announcement. It's putting a target on her back. Falcone will be there. He'll see her." "He will see that she is mine," Alessio bit back, his voice lethal. "He will see that she is protected by the Carbone family, and that to touch her is to declare war. She's a civilian. She's a weakness. You've never had a weakness, Alessio. Don't start now." Alessio grabbed Marco by the front of his shirt, slamming him against the stone wall. "She is not a weakness. She is my strength. She is the one pure thing in this merda of a life. You will protect her as you protect my mother. Understood?" Marco, unfazed, simply nodded. "Yes, Capo." Alessio released him. He stood for a long moment, staring up at the moon, his shoulders heavy. He looked trapped. Evelyn backed away from the window, her heart pounding. a weakness. That's what she was. A target. The art, the dinners, the kisses, they were all just painting a bullseye on her back. The dream of Florence had become a waking nightmare. Alessio wasn't just her protector. He was the source of her danger. The night of the opera gala, the Carbone estate was buzzing like a fortress preparing for a siege. Evelyn stood in front of a full-length mirror, stunned at the woman staring back. Alessio had provided a dress. It was a deep, emerald green velvet that clung to her curves, its neckline elegant and modest, but its color so vibrant it was almost defiant. Her hair was swept up, and at her throat he had fastened a heavy, antique gold necklace set with a single, stunning emerald. A donna must match her capo, he'd whispered, his fingers warm on her neck. She felt like an imposter, a waitress dressed up for a masquerade. "You are beautiful, bambina," Isabella said, clasping her hands. "Tonight you are not just Evelyn. You are a Carbone." The ride to the opera house was a silent, high-tension parade. They were in a reinforced Rolls-Royce, with a black SUV in front and another behind. Alessio, immaculate in a black tuxedo, sat beside her, his hand on her knee. He was perfectly calm, but his eyes were scanning the streets, missing nothing. The gala was a sea of old money and new power. Politicians, judges, and the city's elite mingled under crystal chandeliers. And, as Marco had predicted, the other families were there. Evelyn spotted him instantly. Riccardo Falcone. He was the opposite of Alessio. Where Alessio was dark, brooding, and controlled, Falcone was blonde, smiling, and reptilian. He moved through the crowd with a slick, practiced charm, a glass of champagne in his hand. Alessio kept Evelyn glued to his side. He introduced her, his voice possessive. "This is Miss Evelyn Hayes. She is a guest of my mother's." The implication was clear. She was with him. She was untouchable. Riccardo Falcone's blue eyes found hers across the room. He smiled, a slow, predatory lifting of his lips, and raised his glass to her. Evelyn felt a chill snake down her spine. "I need some air," Evelyn whispered to Alessio, feeling suffocated by the scrutiny. "Stay close. I'll come with you," he said. "No, Alessio, please," she insisted, needing a moment away from his suffocating protection. "Just to the terrace. Marco can see me from the door." He hesitated, his jaw tight. 2 minutes. Do not talk to anyone. Evelyn slipped through the French doors onto a wide, stone terrace overlooking the city. The cold night air was a relief. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes. "He's very protective." Evelyn's eyes snapped open. Riccardo Falcone was leaning against the balustrade not 10 feet away, seemingly admiring the view. He was alone. Evelyn's heart hammered. She looked back at the doors. Marco was there, watching, but he hadn't seen Falcone approach from the other side of the terrace. "You shouldn't be here," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "Neither should you, Bella. This isn't your world. You're what was it? A waitress, an art student." He knew. Of course he knew. He'd had her investigated. "Alessio has expensive taste," Falcone continued, taking a sip of his champagne. "But he's careless. He's mixing business with, well, you." "Leave me alone," she said, turning to go. "I'm trying to help you, Evelyn," he said, his voice dropping to a confidential purr. He took a step closer. She could smell his cologne, something sharp and citrusy. "Alessio Carbone is going to get you killed. He's starting a war he can't win. He thinks he's a king, but he's just a man. And men have weaknesses." He smiled, his eyes tracing the emerald at her throat. "You are his weakness." "You don't scare me," she lied. "I should." He was now inches from her. "It's a dangerous world. People get hurt, especially people who get too close to Alessio. He's a shadow, and he blots out everything he touches. He reached out and stroked the emerald. Go to Florence, Evelyn. Take the money he gave you and run. Run and don't ever look back. It's the only way you'll live to see the Uffizi. Evelyn! Alessio's voice was a roar. The doors burst open. Alessio was there, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. Marco and Santino were right behind him, their hands inside their jackets. Riccardo Falcone didn't even flinch. He just smiled, taking his hand from her necklace. Just giving the lady some advice, Carbone. Lovely party. He sauntered past, holding his champagne glass, and disappeared back into the crowd. Alessio strode to her, grabbing her by the arms. His fingers dug in like talons. What did he say to you? What did he say? He told me to run, she whispered, tears of terror welling in her eyes. He told me to go to Florence. Did he touch you? His voice was a low, lethal vibration. He touched the necklace. The control in Alessio snapped. He pulled her against him, crushing her mouth with his. It wasn't a kiss. It was a brand, a furious, desperate reclaiming. It was raw, possessive, and full of a terror that mirrored her own. He was kissing her as if she were already dead. He broke the kiss, his forehead pressed against hers, his breathing ragged. You are not going anywhere. Do you understand me? She nodded, unable to speak. He touches you. He touches me, Alessio snarled. He grabbed her hand, pulling her back inside. We're leaving. Now. As they swept through the ballroom, past the shocked faces of the city's elite, Evelyn knew the truth. The cage door had just been locked. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. And she was the prize. The estate became a bunker. The gates were permanently closed. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Alessio was a phantom, consumed by meetings, his face etched with the strain of the coming war. The house was thick with a suffocating, silent dread. Evelyn, trapped, devoted herself to Isabella. The old woman seemed oblivious to the tension, lost in her own world of gardening and memories. Evelyn found solace in the routine, in the simple domestic acts of cooking and reading. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn was in the attic, looking for an old photo album at Isabella's request. The attic was filled with the ghosts of the Carbone family, dust-covered furniture, steamer trunks, and portraits draped in white sheets. In the corner, she found a small, leather-bound trunk. It wasn't locked. Inside were old letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon, and photographs. She pulled one out. It was a black-and-white photo of a young, smiling Isabella, probably no older than 17. She was beautiful, full of life. But it wasn't the man beside her that made Evelyn's blood run cold. It was the man behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. He was young, handsome, and wearing the uniform of a waiter. It was Mr. Henderson. Evelyn's heart stopped. She sifted through the photos. Henderson, or rather, a younger, happier version of him, was in all of them. Isabella, laughing on a Vespa. Isabella and him sharing a gelato. These weren't casual photos. This was love. She opened one of the letters. The postmark was from 40 years ago. It was written in flowery, passionate Italian. My Isabella, I cannot live without you. Your father will not separate us. I will wait for you at the pier, Thursday. We will run away. Your forever, Leonardo. Leonardo. Evelyn suddenly remembered a name she'd seen on a crumpled envelope in the diner's back office. Leonardo Hendersoni. Mr. Henderson wasn't just a sleazy manager. He was Leonardo Hendersoni. He was Isabella's first love, the man she was supposed to run away with. Evelyn sank onto an old trunk, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Alessio's father, a powerful capo even then, must have forced them apart. He must have arranged for Isabella to marry him instead. And Leonardo? What happened to him? She looked at the man in the photo, full of hope, and thought of the bitter, defeated man she'd worked for. The Carbone family hadn't just broken Isabella's heart. They had destroyed Leonardo's life. They had taken his family's business, which Evelyn vaguely recalled Janine gossiping was lost in a bad deal, and left him with nothing but the Verona, a ghost of his former life, forced to watch the Carbones thrive. She had to know. She took the photo and the letter and went to find Isabella. She found her in the greenhouse, humming as she potted geraniums. "Isabella," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. She held out the photograph. "Who is this?" Isabella's humming stopped. She wiped her hands on her apron, her face paling as she looked at the photo. Her hand flew to her mouth. Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In the attic. His name was Leonardo," Evelyn pressed gently. "You loved him." Isabella sank onto a stool, the vibrant life draining from her. "Leonardo," she breathed, tracing his face on the photo. He was my life." She confessed everything. They were to be married. Her father, a Carbone ally, had forbidden it, promising her instead to the rising capo, Alessio's father. They had planned to elope, but Alessio's father found out. His men, they convinced Leonardo to stay away. They took his family's small shipping business, their restaurant, everything. They left him with the Verona diner, a constant, humiliating reminder of his failure. "I never saw him again," Isabella cried, real, racking sobs. "I was married a month later. I learned to love my husband. I did. But I never forgot Leonardo." "My God, Isabella," Evelyn said, her mind reeling. "But that is not the secret, Bambina," Isabella whispered, grabbing Evelyn's arm, her eyes wild with a new, fresh terror. "What secret?" I see him. Sometimes." Evelyn stared. "You see Leonardo, Mr. Henderson? I go to the diner. I went to see him," Isabella confessed, her voice cracking. "He is so broken, so angry. It is my family's fault. I wanted to help him." A cold, horrifying dread, worse than anything she'd felt on the terrace, filled Evelyn. "How, Isabella? How did you help him?" "Money," Isabella said, frantic. "Just money. I would leave extra, and sometimes I would tell him things." "Tell him what?" Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Small things. Things Alessio wouldn't miss. When a shipment was late, or when a new man was hired. Just small gossip. So Leonardo could, I don't know, feel important, feel like he had something." Evelyn felt the floor drop out from under her. Isabella, in her guilt and naivete, hadn't just been giving her old flame money. She had been leaking information. "Isabella," Evelyn said, her voice deathly calm. "What have you told him recently? About Alessio's business? Think." "Nothing. Just yesterday. He called the house line. He was so upset. He said he was losing the diner. I told him not to worry. I told him Alessio was making a big new deal, a new shipping route. Something legitimate." Evelyn grabbed her. "What shipping route, Isabella? What was the name?" I heard Alessio on the phone. AMC Logistics. He said the first shipment was tonight, at midnight, at the South Dock, Pier 12. I just told Leonardo. So he would know Alessio was doing well. So he..." Evelyn's blood turned to ice. AMC Logistics. She'd seen the file on Alessio's desk. It was his multi-million-dollar deal to legitimize his shipping business. And Isabella, in her tragic, misguided guilt, had just told her bitter, broken ex-lover, Leonardo Hendersoni. Evelyn knew with chilling certainty that a man as consumed by vengeance as Leonardo wouldn't just keep that information. He would sell it, and the only person who would buy it was Riccardo Falcone. It wasn't just a leak. It was a trap. Falcone wasn't just going to hit the shipment. He was going to be waiting for it. He was going to wipe out Alessio's crew, destroy his legitimate deal, and leave the Carbone family in ruins. And it was all because of a 40-year-old broken heart. Evelyn ran. She flew out of the greenhouse, clutching the old photograph, her heart pounding a rhythm of pure adrenaline. She didn't know the layout of the house, not really, but she followed the sound of Alessio's voice. She found him in his study. The room was thick with cigar smoke. Alessio was at his desk, on the phone, flanked by Marco and Santino. He was giving the final order. "Marco, you lead the team at Pier 12. I want that AMC manifest signed, and the cargo moving by 12:05. No mistakes. This is the future, capisci?" "Alessio, stop!" Evelyn burst into the room, gasping for breath. All three men turned. Alessio's face hardened. "Evelyn, I am in a meeting. Get out!" "No!" she shouted, throwing the photograph of Leonardo and Isabella onto his desk. "You can't go to Pier 12. It's a trap." Alessio looked at the photo, then at her, his eyes dangerously calm. "Explain." "His name is Leonardo Hendersoni, Mr. Henderson, from the diner," Evelyn said, the words tumbling out. He and your mother were in love 40 years ago. Your father destroyed him. He took everything. He left him with the diner." Marco and Santino exchanged a dark, knowing look. This was old history. "What?" Alessio bit out. "Does this have to do with tonight?" "Your mother," Evelyn cried, tears streaming down her face. "She's been seeing him. At the diner. She's been leaking information. Small things for years. She was trying to atone for what your family did." The color drained from Alessio's face. He looked at Marco, who looked at the floor, confirming the betrayal. "And she told him, Alessio," Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. "She told him about AMYE logistics. She told him about Pier 12. Tonight? At midnight?" The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock. Alessio Carbone looked, for 1 second, utterly broken. The two people he trusted most in the world. His mother. And her. He picked up the phone. His voice was not a yell. It was a low, terrifying whisper, spoken in a rapid, brutal Sicilian dialect. He spoke for 10 seconds and hung up. The operation was off. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. "Marco, Santino, find Leonardo Hendersoni. Bring him to the warehouse. Now." The two men nodded and vanished from the room. Alessio turned to Evelyn. He was a volcano of controlled, lethal rage. His eyes were black holes. "Where is she?" He found her in the garden, humming as she potted geraniums. "You," Alessio said, his voice shaking with a pain that was deeper than anger. "All these years, all my life, you, who I protected, you, who I built this fortress for. You betrayed me. For him, a fallito, a failure. He was my love," Isabella sobbed, collapsing. "Your father, he stole my life. I just wanted to fix one thing." "You fixed nothing," Alessio roared, the control finally breaking. "You destroyed everything. You gave my entire future to Riccardo Falcone. For what? For a ghost? He sold that information, Mama. He sold us out. He was going to have my men slaughtered on that dock." Isabella let out a wail of such profound, animalistic grief that Evelyn had to cover her own mouth. This was the truth. The man she loved had used her, and in doing so, she had almost killed her own son. Alessio turned, his back to his hysterical mother. He looked at Evelyn, his face a mask of agony. My whole life, my father's legacy, my mother's betrayal. It's all Sina. Ash, he looked utterly lost. The capo, the shadow, the unbreakable man, was gone. In that moment, Evelyn Hayes, the waitress from the Verona, made a choice. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer a companion. She walked to him, right into the heart of his rage, and put her hands on his chest. He was trembling. "No," she said, her voice firm, cutting through his despair. "It is not Ash." He stared at her, confused. "You are Alessio Carbone," she said, her eyes boring into his. "She is your mother. She was a fool, and she was manipulated by a man your family destroyed. You will forgive her, because she is all you have." And then, Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. "You will destroy them." A slow, dangerous light began to dawn in Alessio's eyes. He was seeing it. "How?" he whispered. "You stopped the shipment." "But Falcone doesn't know that," Evelyn said, her mind working with a cold, clear logic that surprised her. "He's waiting at Pier 12. He's expecting your men. He has his best crews there, waiting for a fight. He's exposed." "He thinks he's the hunter," she said, her voice dropping. "Show him what a real shadow looks like." Alessio grabbed her face and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion or of ownership. It was a kiss of fealty, a kiss that said, "You are me, and I am you." He turned from her, went back to his study, and made 3 phone calls. The counterstrike was swift and surgical. While Riccardo Falcone's best men shivered in the dark at an empty pier, waiting for a shipment that never came, Alessio's crews hit 3 of Falcone's primary warehouses simultaneously. It wasn't a war, it was an execution. By dawn, the Falcone family was broken. Leonardo Hendersone. He was never seen again. The Verona diner was boarded up by morning. A week later, the estate was quiet. The war was over. Evelyn was sitting in the garden, reading. Isabella was beside her, quiet, her hands still. The 2 women sat in silence, a silent, shared grief. Alessio walked out. He looked tired, but for the first time, he looked peaceful. He sat on the bench, taking his mother's hand in one of his. She flinched, but he held it. "It is finished, Mama," he said softly. "He will not hurt you again." She looked at him, her eyes streaming. "My son, forgive me. I already have," he said, his voice thick. He then turned to Evelyn and held out his other hand. In his palm was a small, white envelope. Her heart sank. It was over. He was sending her away. She opened it. Inside were 2 first-class, one-way tickets to Florence, Italy. "2," she whispered. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "I can't let my heart go that far from me," he said. "And besides, I've never seen the Pieta." Evelyn looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. You'd leave all this?" "The foundations are strong," he said, squeezing his mother's hand. "Marco can handle it for a while." He stood, pulling Evelyn to her feet. "My father's legacy was built on shadows and anger. I'm going to build mine on art, and on a woman who was brave enough to speak Italian to a lonely old lady in a diner." He kissed her, and for the first time, it wasn't a kiss of possession or of desperation. It was a kiss of partnership. And so, the waitress who dreamed of Florence and the Mafia Boss who lived in the shadows found their masterpiece. Not in a museum, but in each other. They left behind the world of violence and betrayal to build a new life based on a shared language and a new foundation of trust. But the question remains, can a shadow ever truly leave the darkness behind? Or is this just a beautiful intermission before the next war begins? Thank you for listening to this full-length drama. If this story stole your heart, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a story of dangerous romance, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have so many more stories of love, drama, and unexpected twists waiting just for you. Let us know in the comments what you think Alessio and Evelyn's new life in Florence will look like. We'll see you in the next story.